Welcome to my Bake Escape. This week I am sharing a recipe for a classic lemon loaf. This loaf is delicious. The icing is perfectly sweet and lemony, and I think you're going to like this and I'm going to want to make it really soon. The full recipe is on my website at mybakeescape.com. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and Pinterest at My Bake Escape. All right, let's get started. So for this recipe, you will need lemons. I only used one of these lemons because they were a good size, but if you have two smaller lemons, you can use two of them. And you're also going to need all-purpose flour, vegetable oil, sour cream, granulated sugar, baking powder, salt, vanilla extract, 2 eggs. To get started, you're going to begin by combining the dry ingredients. So to the flour, you're going to add the baking powder, followed by the salt. Mix that together. Next, you will work on the wet ingredients. So start by adding the sugar to a large bowl, and then we're going to zest one of these lemons. And to zest a lemon, you use a microplane. It is a very fine grater that will take just the yellow part of the lemon off where all the oils and the flavor is. So you're going to zest the entire lemon into the sugar. Then you're going to mix the sugar and the lemon zest together for a few minutes. So you can do this with a spoon, or I'm using a hand mixer just to really mix in the zest into the sugar. Next, you're going to add the eggs. We're using 2 whole eggs for this recipe. Now you want to combine the eggs and the sugar until they are nice and fluffy, like this. Next, add in the vegetable oil. Followed by the sour cream. And the last ingredient for the wet portion is vanilla extract. Now it's time to incorporate the dry ingredients into the wet. So we're going to just go ahead and pour them all into the large bowl. And starting the mixer on a low setting, you're going to just start mixing the dry ingredients into the wet until it is just mixed in and looks like that. I'm using a 9x5 loaf pan for this recipe. I use a little bit of nonstick cooking spray to just spray the inside of the pan, and then pour the batter into the pan. And you can see specks of yellow lemon zest throughout the batter. That's going to add a lot of flavor. So you just want to make sure that this is evenly spread in the pan. And this is going to bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Make sure that the oven is preheated. And you're going to bake until the lemon loaf is completely set in the center. And you'll notice around the 35-minute mark that the loaf might start browning a little too quickly. Just tent it with foil and continue to bake until the center is completely set. Once the loaf is baked, you're going to remove it from the oven and let it cool in the pan on a cooling rack for about 10 to 15 minutes. After about 10 minutes, I carefully ran a butter knife along the edge of the loaf and the pan just to make sure that it is released. Give it a little shake, and I see that it is released from the pan, and then I pour it out onto a cooling rack to let it cool completely before moving on to the next step. And the pan is completely clean, nothing stuck, so that was good. Before you ice the loaf, you want to make sure it is cooled down completely. So for the icing, you're going to need about 2 cups of powdered sugar, some salt, and the juice of 1 lemon. So to the powdered sugar, I added the salt, and now I'm going to juice the lemon into the powdered sugar. I start by juicing just half of the lemon, and then I mix it, and then I continue to add juice as I need it for the consistency that I want. And I want a drizzle consistency that is not too runny, because I do want the glaze to stay on the loaf and not all drip down the side. That I add about half of the lemon first and start mixing it. At this point, I can see it's pretty thick. I'm going to need some more juice. So I went ahead and juiced the second half little by little, adding juice a little at a time until I achieve the consistency that I want. And this is the consistency that I want, a nice drizzle consistency. And then now that the loaf is completely cool, I'm going to go ahead and add the icing. So I'm just taking my time drizzling the icing all over the top of the loaf. I want to make sure that I'm evenly distributing the icing so that it will fall over all the sides and the edges of the loaf. You can also use a mini spatula to kind of push it around a little bit. If you see a spot that doesn't have enough icing, you can quickly do that right now as it's nice and wet. This icing will need to set before you cut it, so it takes about a half hour for it to set. So you just want to let it sit like this and let it set completely before you cut it. So the icing has been sitting for about 40 minutes, and you can see it is set. It's not sticky, so I can go ahead and cut a piece off. Look at how delicious that looks. The loaf is a little yellow inside. It's perfectly baked, and you can see a nice layer of that lemony sweet icing. And if you look inside, you'll see bits of the lemon zest throughout the loaf. You can get 8 to 10, maybe even 12 slices out of this loaf. Just depends on how thick you cut the slices. And I would suggest storing this in an airtight container in the refrigerator for up to 5 days. The loaf is tender and moist and has a wonderful lemon flavor throughout, but that lemon icing adds another layer of flavor that you're just gonna love. If you don't like things too sweet, you can add a little less of the icing, but honestly, the icing makes the loaf so delicious. If you like lemons like I do, you're gonna love this recipe. It's not too difficult to make, and I think you're gonna really enjoy it. For the full recipe, visit mybakeescape.com. I really appreciate you following me and subscribing to my channel. If you haven't done that yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and have a sweet day. Oh my